This is a continuation of a previous interview we had with Ozana Korer from Cyber Wayfinder. She shared with us how to create cybersecurity awareness and training programs, why and how to reskill and upskill people. And what we know now is that cybersecurity is a vast field, and it is not only about IT, what usually people think when you attempt cybersecurity, and it's not only about technology. It's a lot about people, it's about processes, it's about laws. Why don't we start with you, Kathleen? What was your journey in cybersecurity? How did you profile yourself, and what skills you think people should develop and contribute to cybersecurity?
Okay. Hi. I'm the data protection officer at Xerius, which is a company that processes a lot of personal data. So, of course, we are interested in cybersecurity, in information security. I've been working there for a couple of years, and the job is never the same. Every day is different. Sometimes in the morning I don't know what will happen throughout the day, and then it starts off as a boring day, and then all of a sudden something happens, or my colleagues need some advice. But the vast majority of tasks that I do at Xerius is the awareness training, because we've got all this technical stuff, and we really needed the IT guys. They do a pretty good job. But if one of these technical measures doesn't work, it's sort of to the awareness, it's sort of to the people who are behind the computers. Whether it's they decide to click a button, to visit a website, to disclose personal information over the phone, and someone else. So I think it's really, like you said, it's not all about IT and technical part. It's just, it's the basic layer, and on top of that, we've got organizational measures. Think about policies, guidelines in the IT policy for the employees. And on top of that, you have the awareness, and you have the personal skills and the personal knowledge how to deal if something feels a bit dodgy. Should I report this? Should I click? Should I take the risk on just going along? So I think we have to really take and spend a lot of time on training people, training knowledge, training skills, so that it becomes a habit.
I see. So that's a lot of soft skills eventually that you need to have this awareness to communicate the message and put together the technical details and the human, let's say, interaction with working. What kind of knowledge, or how do you acquire this? How do you improve yourself on a daily basis? Is it just the experience that you have gathered, or you had a special training that helped you in this field?
I think the soft skills have to be there in the person itself, which can, of course, make him better. In a previous life, I used to be a mathematics teacher, so you have to know how to sell boring stuff to people. You have to tell them off without that they feel bad. So you have to make a package of it so that they understand and they want to contribute. And in the end, if you do that very well, your employees or colleagues or family or friends will become ambassadors as well, because then they say, oh, Jacqueline told me that I shouldn't do this because of that, and that's a purpose.
I see your inspiration for all the teachers out there. Seeing this video, they should definitely join cybersecurity.
Yes.
It's a very similar field, maybe working with grown-up kids, but okay, that's really definitely another interesting perspective of where you could start and how you could use skills acquired in different professions.
And we were talking about soft skills, but you also need a very analytical mind to decide in a split of a second if something is working, if something is going wrong, For example, the technical guys just give me a call and they say, okay, something's going on, what should we do? And then it's just, you have to decide, and yeah, use your analytical skills.
Yes,
as well.
yes. I understand analytical skills is a lot about what we do. We do kind of GRC, governance, risk and compliance. You have to understand a little bit the business. You have to understand a little bit issue and to find a way to communicate it to management. What is your, let's say, key priority for this kind of a job? What skills did you have and how did you yourself develop this?
Yeah, so we work mainly with small and medium-sized companies throughout different industry sectors. So I think there's a lot in ethics, soft skills. So you have to understand different businesses and what your customer expects from you. Everybody is right into cybersecurity, take a huge budget and make everything safe. So you have to teach the management of these companies where they are vulnerable, what may be a pragmatic way to get the company safe, maybe not without wasting too much money, but spending enough and implementing enough measures so that the company is safe. So you have to be very versatile in talking to different kinds of roles in the company because there's a very different set of things and measures you want to implement with them and get what the company really wants and to the direction where they are safe, but not too far, so there's no problems to manage the operating stuff of the security.
So it's, if I get it right, it's a lot of sales as well. You have to understand what is the need, product, what needs to be fixed, but also to sell it to management so that they are on board, they have the budget.
I would just work for sales, so not for customers, not for different companies. But even within one company, you really have to understand the business, because as a cybersecurity professional, you can say we can't do that, we have to do that, and we need so much money, but that doesn't work. So you have to get the understanding of all stakeholders within the company or the project.
Yes. As a business owner, you know, you also have to do the accounting, you also have to do the recruitment, the dealing with tax declarations, office supplies. So it's a real encompassing venture, basically, and there is a role for everyone to contribute. And Christian, I'm coming to you because you actually have a little bit more higher level view of cybersecurity. You work mostly not with clients, but with governments, with officials, with politicians, with policy, with documents. So what kind of skills you need to cover this field? And I also would like you to highlight how important it is, or why it's important to have people working in policy for cybersecurity.
Like you said, I don't know if it's a higher level, but at least it's on a technical level, because I do work with cyber policy, guiding governments on what kind of policies to implement. But it's not only compliance and legal requirements, it's also which kind of initiatives will actually help companies. Is it funding for investing in cybersecurity measures? Is it collaborating with universities to create a more, or to make more candidates available who have a background in cybersecurity? And but I think we come back to that there are a lot of soft skills involved, and the most prominent soft skill for me, at least in my work as a political consultant, is communications, because you need to communicate in a way, so not to say anything negative about security consultants, but they might have a financial incentive to paint a very clear picture about how dangerous everything is. On the other hand, you don't want to create the false sense of security that some companies have, that everything's going to be fine, nothing's going to happen, we're not going to be attacked. So you have to find the right balance to, on one hand, really get the message across to politicians and government employees to say this is important. We need to allocate funds. We need to take this seriously. But on the other hand, we don't want to be the one crying wolf, because even though we see major breaches, we have the Danish company Maersk was hit by the NotPetya attack, costing hundreds of millions of euros. On the other hand, you have many companies who all you say that they're companies that have been hacked, and then there are the companies that don't know they've been hacked. And the latter part is still a very large group. So if you continue crying wolf and saying this is so dangerous, this is happening right now, and they don't see it in their own business, they're going to become complacent. So communication, both when you talk privately to, it could also be, I mean, I'm from a business association, so all the top, the suites of all our member companies, or at least some of the business or the essential and critical societal companies, their top management will need to know about cybersecurity, because within this new directive, this will become a requirement. So we need to communicate to them in one way, we need to communicate to the politicians in another way, and then we need to communicate to the press, because you want to communicate it in a way where they will actually pick it up. And I have to say, I've done a lot of pitches to journalists, and you have to give them something they can put in a headline.
Yes, yes, exactly. So we can have another talk on communication. It's an area on its own worth discussing. But what you said is also very interesting, that you are also a little bit in the middle. So you are the one bringing the message from business to policymakers, but also coming back to business and saying, hey guys, finally, this is what the EU wants to do. This is what the draft legislation is about. And do you also manage to get feedback on this draft legislation? Could you also feed into the legislative process so that it's not companies coming, we had this with GDPR, famous law, coming after the law is adopted and say, oh, this is very difficult for me to do. Probably if everyone could participate already in the design phase, you will have instruments and measures that are smart.
Yeah, we take a lot of, I mean, all our policy work is founded on the input we get from members. So on cybersecurity, we have the CISO network. So we have around 30 CISOs from some of the middle and larger Danish companies, and they have, I present upcoming policies to them, and they give me something to take back and to put into the legislative process, both at the European level, but also at the national Danish level. And we also collaborate closely with the Danish ICT Association. They also have a committee on cybersecurity, but then there's the vendors. And so we actually get both perspectives from the end users and from the companies trying to defend their businesses against cyber criminals, and on the other hand, from the vendors who have a little bit of more of a key knowledge on what's the latest threat landscape look like, what are the newest trends in attack vectors, which is very helpful because we see, okay, this is what we're going to have to protect against in the future.
It's a little bit forward-looking, it's not reactive when we are hit, but see what is happening out there.
Exactly.
And in terms of laws, you highlighted NIS for the Information Security Directive, which is critical, normally infrastructure, but now also cover wider scope.
Yeah.
What is your perspective on it? What should people know about NIS?
I think it's still not clear where the line is going to be drawn exactly regarding the scope. So actually right now, of course, most companies, some companies can already foresee that they will fall within the scope and need to take seriously, need to read through or hire in people that can guide them through the process. I mean, yesterday I had a consultant coming into our CISO network. Obviously, I was here in Athens, so we did virtually to talk about some of the new requirements. So that's one thing, but actually what we do mainly, because it's a directive, so it needs to be implemented in national law. And what we want to see is that we have a harmonized application across member states, but also within the member states. Because currently there's talk that because I think it's 15 or 16 different sectors, that it might be implemented in 15 different law packages. And let's say a company provides both telecommunications and energy, they might fall within two texts of law and also two authorities to actually supervise them. And so what we basically need, and that's why it's nice to be here in Athens with ENISA, because what we need is actually some implementation guidelines that make sure that the implementation is somewhat harmonized across member states, but also that the national governments have some sort of guidelines in order to implement across sectors. Because it probably won't be one authority in each country, because there is difference between the waterworks and the finance sector in terms of maturity, digital infrastructure, and all these things. However, you can't have 10 regulatory bodies going off in separate directions. You need to have somebody who can actually put out some guidelines and say, okay, maybe we need 3 or 5 national authorities who can implement in these various sectors.
Okay, so you're looking up at ENISA for help in that respect.
Right.
Yeah, problem is that during the ENISA or the governments has difficulties reaching the SMEs or the smaller companies. And I think we should reach out to the companies and try to help them to at least know the guidelines and maybe help implement the guidelines.
Indeed, so you're touching upon what actually brought us together in this group. We are all members of ENISA ad hoc working group on enterprise security. You have already seen some output of it, some awareness videos, and we're working on other instruments to support SMEs, improve their cybersecurity, but also be even aware about cybersecurity. And in this group, we're all members intervening as experts supporting the work of ENISA for free, but we also get to contribute to hopefully the bigger improvement of European security. And I think your perspective, what do we need to reach these SMEs from the European perspective, not each of us individually? What kind of instrument or strategy, or what is missing in terms of instruments to reach this?
Yeah, I think there's a huge difference between IT-oriented companies and just smaller SMEs, for example, family businesses. I think it's not that difficult to reach the IT-focused companies. We have to focus on the little ones, the one that have computers and they just use it and they're not aware that there are all kinds of dangers and hackers and things happen. I think we should try to reach them through ambassadors, through a network, through intermediaries, for example, accountants or sector happenings or events, because they will be there. And maybe they don't come to the event just in mind, or I have to improve my cybersecurity, but if it's there, I hope they will listen, they will understand that it's not easy, but it's also not rocket science, and that there are a lot of guidelines and people, companies who are prepared to help them on technical, organizational, or awareness level. So I think we should reach out and try to get as close as we can to these companies.
To the ambassadors.
Yes, we need ambassadors.
So you're appointed one of the ambassador already. That's how much we know. And do you have other ideas? What is your vision for that?
Yeah, probably ENISA could also take a little bit of more marketing measures just to get known to the small and medium-sized companies, because I think most of them probably maybe have heard of the ENISA, but don't know their work, and there should be some campaigns to raise awareness what ENISA does and what guidelines they offer for the different small and medium-sized companies. Could also be some kind of contribution to different conferences. I mean, every European country has at least some IT-orientated conferences where we would reach a lot of IT people or IT management staff when you make a contribution to that and present what ENISA is doing. Maybe also our work will present the guidelines for the small and medium-sized companies or the awareness campaign. So these people see that and get a feeling for that, that it's quite good guidelines for the small and medium-sized companies, that they are not, that are not so big projects like an ISO 27000 or the BSI Grundschutz, which is quite a big project for small and medium-sized companies. So, and they don't have the huge resources that a bigger company would have to invest in cybersecurity and building up a cybersecurity team. So with awareness raising for ENISA and working groups, that would be a great start.
Yes.
The question is, sorry, but the question is whether ENISA should work directly with European companies, or if they should, like the ambassador talked, like whether they should work through national or local business organizations or governmental organizations, because usually, you know, it's the people that are closest to the businesses that can actually talk to them, usually also in their own language.
They trust. Yeah, they have gained trust.
But it might make sense. So one of the things that might be good, turning back to this too, you know, is all about the risk-based approach. And what we've been preaching for years, it should be risk-based. But there's also some sense of saying, but there's a minimum standard. No matter who you are, no matter what the risk you perceive you have is, you know, everybody should update their software and their operating systems. Everybody should do regular backups. Everybody should get like a security package with a firewall. And I mean, I know we have these in Denmark. I think we have seven round tips that every company should follow, and I'm sure that other European countries have them as well. But in order to get it more aligned and to share best practices, maybe ENISA should more work through local governments and be the focal point where best practices are shared and where we can kind of align national practice, so we get more of that we get a universal, I won't say high, but let's say adequate standard of security, whether it be for SMEs or for critical infrastructure or for everything in between.
Yes, what you said is very true. I myself invested time and wrote together with MEP Evelina the guide to cybersecurity for SMEs for Bulgaria. It's obviously very good that I'm Bulgarian, I speak the language, and I understand the economy, the challenges that are specific for each country. So I work to do that. But it is not every country that should spend this time and effort in initiative as well, because you might actually have few good countries that have guides and others that don't manage to make it. So to allow this, as you said, common level, but also to leverage the role of ENISA, they could be the ones starting the initiative, and then people like me and you, we can translate the documents, we could adapt them to the national or local realities, but it should not just be the big bulk of the effort again coming from each individual country.
And it could be more efficiently done. So, for instance, in Denmark, I helped when I was a part of the Danish Business Authority team for digital security. I helped build an online self-assessment tool called the Security Check by IK. And you know, we had a lot of deliberations, how many measures, like what vectors to consider. And I'm sure that other countries have done so as well. So in order to actually use the resources where they're most efficiently used, maybe again use it to share best practices. I spoke with one of our colleagues from the Republic of Ireland who talked about establishing a CERT service for small companies. And I know that we have people in Denmark right now looking at the option to establish an SME CERT, but then we need the best practices in order to make the same mistakes that other people have made before us. So I think that should ideally be the role of ENISA, should be like center of excellence, where people from across Europe can share knowledge and experience, and in turn get best practices, get guidance in what initiatives works and how to implement them in a way that actually reaches out to the companies.
Mhm.
But I think most countries already have guidelines and self-assessment tools. And ESA has some as well because we're working on it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the small SMEs and the small companies don't know that they're out. And they don't take self-assessment and they don't read the guidelines because it's just, there's a gap between what the companies know that's out and what's actually out and available. I think we should work on that.
It is again because we invest our time and energy initiative in drafting eventually the same thing. It should be coordinated so that we bring it to the end-to-end process, we bring it to the user. And but this is a lot about SME. Finally, we discussed also with you informally yesterday that our industry is not that mature yet. It would be very important also to raise awareness about this industry as is what is cybersecurity about. I would like to thank you all for coming, for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you.
And
Always a pleasure.
it wouldn't be the last one, I hope, and we continue our work at the NISA, so you would hear from us also in the future.